not. If you are interested in hearing about future Talking Green events, we have a sign up at the back. So, and we really are Talking Green events that are really about educating individuals about all things about sustainability. Transportation, we're pretty new. Transportation is pretty new for us. We do a lot on energy, waste reduction, farming, or local food issues. But we're really excited this time to have to bring in transportation. Before we get started, I just wanted to tell you about two events we have coming up. We have our August Talking Green event with Patrick Eisman. He is with History Colorado, and Paul Bonnefield, who many of you know. He's pretty famous locally. But we will be partnering with Historic Routt County, and we'll be at the library. And it's adaptive reuse of existing buildings, and we'll have local examples and stories. So those obviously will be provided by Paul Bonnefield. But we're really excited to have Patrick Eisman. He is with History Colorado and really an expert on the reuse of existing buildings. So, September 17th, we are partnering with the Colorado Energy Office. We have Computer coming to talk about energy efficiency and the green MLS. So talking about the importance of energy efficiency in the value of your home. And there will be, this is continuing education credit for realtors, but it really has useful information for just about everybody. So those are our two most current upcoming events. Of course, we cannot have Talking Green without our sponsors. So quickly thanking our sponsors tonight: New Power Fund, Home Link, and Mountain Resort. I'm going to introduce Paul Cody, who's our president of the board, and he really is the one who spearheaded this specific Talking Green. So come on up, Paul.
Okay, thank you. Yes, this has been an important, one of many important issues that I think this community faces. It's because of our distance from airports, and we don't have a very significant, what's the word of, enough people here to make a lot of these ideas work very well. But there are some things coming along, and I think they're important. So we've invited Diane Mitsch, who is our Colorado House representative, in case you didn't know that, who's going to give us a broad overview of transportation, and also David Krutzinger from CDOT. He's the Special Projects Manager, who's going to talk about the monorail system that's being planned. And Jonathan Flint from the Steamboat Springs Transit, and he's the manager of the Steamboat Springs Transit. We're going to talk about some of the things that are going on with the city. Also, I just want you to know that there's a lot of different aspects to this whole issue of transportation. Some of them are relevant to this community, and some of them are not. And I like to think of this more as a brainstorming kind of an event in which you are invited to brainstorm with us and look for solutions that will be suitable for Steamboat Springs and Routt County. To that end, I have put a couple of articles that I did, I researched the other day. One has to do with bike sharing. There's a lot of communities, including Aspen, have bike sharing programs. There are transportation network companies. You may have heard of UberX, that has a different kind of a take on how to get from one place to another. I also just put a general crazy top 10 pollution solutions that are not necessarily confined to transportation, although there is a brief description of a photosynthesis bicycle there. And in case you didn't know it, there are alternative fuel vehicles that we have outside here, one of which is my Mercedes, which runs on recycled vegetable oil, and I will be out there refueling after the program is over. So I invite you to listen, ask questions. I think we're going to reserve questions till everybody's made their presentation. Should be no more than 30 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A for any of our participants. And then an informal brainstorming. You can talk with me out here if I'm not out by my grease car refilling. So without further ado, let me introduce Diane Mitsch.
Thanks all for coming. This is a topic that I've been interested in and active in since the 80s. As many of you know, I moved here in 1976 and have been a bicycle commuter for many, many years. In the 1980s, we first started getting sort of mountain biking going in the community, and I remember vividly going to the chamber and asking for money for summer mountain bike events, and no one had ever heard of those. And we got that going, and of course, here we are now. And a number of you in the audience have been so active over the years in multimodal transportation. But I wanted to step back a little bit today and sort of start with what is multimodal transportation, because A, there are of course a lot of new faces here, and B, people tend to get in their little niche and they look at one piece of it. They look at the bike piece, or the high-speed rail piece, or the local transit piece, or the carpooling piece, or the walking piece. And the key that I'm going to keep hammering on with multimodal transportation solutions is interconnectivity. When you have disparate pieces that aren't connected, they may work for that little area over there, but not for even a whole community, let alone a whole state or a whole country. So here we go. What is a multimodal transportation system? It essentially is seamless interconnection between all modes. Air travel, which of course we have 2 airports here, so how do you get there? And once you get somewhere else, how do you get there from the plane? Personal vehicles, whether it's your car, your truck, however you move around in a motorized vehicle, personal vehicles are critical. Ride shares of various types, whether it's the newer UberX with the mobile app, or whether it is the more traditional carpooling, whether on a ride board, web-based, what have you, or van pooling systems. As you may recall, one of the things I did as a commissioner was got a van pool for commuters from South Routt, and that went through a long grant process, which I won't bore you with. Transit. Transit is critical in our community, and my hat's off to Jonathan Flint and the Steamboat Springs Transit. We have one of the best transit systems of any community of our size. As you know, it's free to ride the bus, and there's lots of connectivity. What some of you may not know, and I'm sure Jonathan will talk about it, so I'm just going to mention it, is we have long had bus service between here and Craig, because as you know, many folks from Craig work in Steamboat Springs. And so our transit system is both local and regional, and soon, and I'm sure David will talk about it, we will have an interregional bus system on the I-70 corridor going from Union Station in Denver to the airport. And my guess is he might talk a little bit about that. So, and then bike and pets. Bicycles here and pedestrian mobility are really, really important. They're something people value both for their quality of life, but also for the convenience that people have in not having to find a parking place, and of course, reduction of pollution and all the health benefits as well. So what are we talking about when we talk about multimodal transportation? We're talking about choices. We're talking about a system that gives people a wide variety of choice, and that's critical to transportation solutions. We're also talking about solutions for congestion. If everyone were in the single occupancy vehicle car all the time, we would have to build so much new road infrastructure. A, it would be impossible because we don't have the money. And B, what we've seen in other places where we have additional capacity lanes, both in Colorado and throughout the country, is if you build it, they will come. So having these other modes available for people and having that kind of choice as to whether you're going to go up to the mountain on Steamboat Springs Transit, whether you're going to drive and park remotely, whether you, as some of us used to do, I did when I was very young, ride your mountain bike with your skis and a bike rack. There's a whole bunch of possibilities. Preventing air pollution is a critical part of, and a critical reason for having multimodal transportation, and of course promoting health. If people are walking, if they're biking, that's healthier for them, but also when you reduce air pollution and reduce stress in congestion, that certainly promotes health as well. The ideal of seamless interconnection is a tough one, but it is critical, and we're certainly not there yet, either here, statewide, or of course nationally. But when you have interconnected systems, you have cost savings for infrastructure, you have cost savings for individuals, cost savings for businesses. And where you have that kind of interconnection, you do see transportation costs going down for whole communities and also for individuals. What's the difficulty in getting there? I'm not going to belabor this point, but as some of you may well know, we've been in a transportation funding crisis since at least the beginning of 2000. And it certainly was exacerbated during the Great Recession, but it was there before the Great Recession. It's not due to that. Transportation funding in both the state of Colorado and nationally really comes from the gas tax, the state gas tax, the federal gas tax. Neither of them has been raised since the early 1990s. For slightly different reasons in Colorado. With the advent of Tabor, you no longer have the automatic pegging of the gas tax to the consumer price index, which you used to have. And at the national level, beginning in 1993, you had a reticence on the part of the United States Congress to make those kinds of changes. Until then, the gas tax had always been indexed to inflation. That becomes more important to bear in mind when you realize that since the early 1990s, when you look at the construction cost index, not just the regular consumer price index, but the cost of road building, the cost of bicycle infrastructure building, the cost of building transit lanes, all those construction costs have gone up far more, by 10, 15 times the consumer price index. So you've got a stagnant source of funding, and you've got increasing costs. You've got more people traveling. You've got more need for additional capacity. You've got more need for a variety of modes. I don't have a silver bullet for that. But one of the ways that CDOT and the state of Colorado have been trying to move on the funding issue is P3, public-private partnerships. And there are lots of examples starting. Many of them, the most important one, of course, was the most controversial one, U.S. Highway 36, had a bicycle component, a bus rapid transit component, which I'll talk a little bit about, and I bet these guys will talk about more. Bus rapid transit is one of the very interesting new modes of transit. So getting private investors really excited about not just roads and bridges, but also transit and high-speed rail is really important. So what problems do the system solve? We already talked about congestion in general. Time is money. And the data on congestion, I'm not going to bother you with the $800 billion a year that we appear to in the United States spend on congestion. Some of that is stress, some of that is hours lost at work, some of that is pollution. But certainly in Colorado, I think when we're stuck in traffic, we not only are losing employee time, valuable time, we're losing time that can't even be measured or counted in the dollar sense. Stress reduction is critical. Those who have multimodal choices have tended to report lower levels of stress than those who must drive a car to wherever it is they're going. Infrastructure costs. Once you start to get multimodal components, even if they're only partly connected, infrastructure costs start to go down because the maintenance for existing roads, that goes down because you have fewer vehicles traveling. The maintenance for some of these other kinds of facilities is really less costly than asphalt and repaving. The sort of rule for a mile of rural highway, not new capacity, but just keeping it up. Redoing the asphalt is $1 million a mile when those new projects are done. When 131 was improved, it's moving slowly along that direction. That's what the costs were. Air pollution is a critical issue here. one of the major sources, of course, of air pollution, of ozone pollution, and of NOx, and of PM10 is vehicle travel. And non-point water pollution is very important as well. Of course, here in the Yampa River, very important, but important in other places as well as greenhouse gases. Promoting and encouraging health when you have connections between bike lanes, between places where people can walk, where they can get quickly to a bus. Again, you have healthy choices and personal choice. This one is key in our neck of the woods. Since the first Vision 2020 study, 1993-94, the study came out in 1994. You can find it. I bet Kate knows where to find it somewhere. Routt County citizens have consistently stated a preference for multimodal systems, for having some kind of interconnection between transit, between longer term and longer distance transportation, between bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Connectivity and convenience and cost go together, and those are the keys to getting people to vote with their feet or with their pedals, if you will. Bike and ped, you have to have safe and convenient connections. As many of you know, I got us the Safe Routes to Schools grant in 2010, and before that, I worked on bicycle and ped facilities for many years. And connectivity is difficult. Sometimes you have user-made trails that aren't safe. Sometimes it's difficult to get rights of way, to get from A to B, especially for kids going to school. But for all of us, as we're going wherever we're going. Transit, both our local transit, Steamboat Springs Transit, and regional transit, like the transit to Craig, or like the transit that will start next February or March on I-70. There, again, connectivity is critical. If you can't get to the bus without driving somewhere and dealing with parking, you're probably not going to take it to get from the Eagle Airport to Denver or from Craig to Steamboat Springs. If it's inconvenient, and if it costs you time, and if it costs you a lot of money, you're not going to do it. So that's a really important part about getting people to use transit and making sure transit pays its way. The fare box, as I'm sure Jonathan will talk about, is not necessarily what pays for transit. Speed rail. David will talk more about the ADS Advanced Guideway study that just came out. As many of you know, I was involved for some years in the Rocky Mountain Rail Authority, which was a 52-jurisdiction authority that was tasked with carrying out a feasibility study for high-speed rail in 2 corridors, I-25 from Fort Collins to Pueblo, and I-70 from DIA out to the Eagle Airport with a spur to Aspen and a spur to Steamboat. And I got a whole variety of folks to join in that, towns, municipalities, and what the study showed, actually to our surprise, because I was really surprised when I saw the results, because I didn't think it would be feasible technically or feasible in terms of cost. When the study was finished in 2010 and 2011, there were a variety of technologies that could be used, and they would be cost effective if and only if several things were present. 1, interconnectivity between I-25 and I-70. If you did them separately, you didn't have a positive operating ratio, you didn't have a positive cost benefit or benefit cost analysis. When you put those together, you did. Also, you had to have truly high speed, that is maglev, and you had to have maglev in part because that's the only thing that will do the grades in the I-70 corridor, but you had to have it also because it is capable of the kinds of speeds that would be attractive to the consumer. It's not going to be attractive to pay to go on rail if you get there in your car as fast. It's just not. So you have to have a system that has that speed, that connectivity, and the price point. And I'm sure David will talk a lot more about that. Air, I'm not going to belabor that. As we know here, we do flight guarantees to all the mountain towns. But once again, connectivity to our airport, availability, price, and connections, both connections from the airport to town and connections once planes get to Denver or Salt Lake or wherever else they're going to go. And if those of you who think that we have issues in terms of flight guarantees, Eagle County has more difficult issues. All the mountain towns do. Internalizing so-called externalities. We could spend a whole 2-hour session on that one, but how valuable is your time? How do you count that? How do you price that? How valuable is your health and that of your children and grandchildren? Those tend to be externalized in the usual accounting methods for everything, but especially for transportation. Those need to be internalized to talk about the real cost to society of engaging in multimodal projects of one type or another, or not engaging in them, as the case may be. And there are a wide variety of accounting mechanisms now to do that. And back again to investment in P3. Having those public-private partnerships is going to be crucial as we move along the next decade and the next 50 years to try to get a seamless, interconnected system, both locally, regionally, and statewide. I've already talked a little bit about that. That was the original vision in the Rocky Mountain Rail Authority study, and as you can see, again, you have the two corridors. Investment opportunities. I told David this story, I guess I'll tell it to everybody. I was in my office at the county when I was county commissioner, and I was serving on Rocky Mountain Rail, and I got a phone call. This was before the Great Recession. It was from Wall Street investment banker. He said, well, when is your system going to be ready? We want to invest. I'm like, we're doing a feasibility study? We'll get back to you. But actually the data do show that high-speed rail stations and connecting areas are just prime investment. Not just real estate investment, certainly that, but a wide variety of other kinds of investment as well. So there are lots of pieces there in terms of investment opportunities and public-private partnerships. Here to me is one of the most optimistic sets of data I've seen in a very long time. A number of studies have come out in 2014 looking at travel patterns, transportation patterns for millennials, those who are currently aged 25 to 34. And I'm drawing from several different studies, the Brookings study, an American Public Transit Association study, and a University of Michigan Center for Demography study. What you see nationwide is a real movement with their feet, their pedals, their transit ticket to cities that have that. Denver, of course, has fast tracks. It has the bike sharing program that you were talking about. It has a wide variety of connections, and it has a land use pattern that is becoming more and more multi-use. That is residential on the top, commercial on the bottom, vibrant downtown life with ways to get there. And so cities like Denver are really attracting those millennials. Why is that interesting or important for us? And by the way, the mountain towns do too. Certainly mountain towns attract millennials. Whether or not they can afford to stay is a question for another seminar. But what we see is this growing popularity of multi-use development. We see it locally. We've seen articles about it in the paper. It's been going on here for some years with the downtown redevelopment. That kind of development both keeps its value and also then lends us to be able to have bike access, transit access, because things aren't so spread out. Having an urban growth boundary is one of the reasons that here in the Yampa Valley we're able to have a transit system and bike and ped systems that work. And that's true nationally as well. A number of studies done in 2010, 11, 12, 13, and 14 show both nationwide and in Colorado a surge in people using transit and bike for commuting, and of course recreational biking, both road and mountain biking, is just booming. Certainly here in the Yampa Valley with Bike Town USA, with all the events that we have, which are very, very good for our tourism economy, but they also then relate back to people's desire to have bicycle and pedestrian accommodations and to make their choices of where they're going to locate their business and where they're going to relocate themselves on that basis. On the Front Range, it seems that one of the attractants for new business is multimodal transportation, is that ability in the Denver area to use fast tracks, to get your employees quickly back and forth, and to get up to the mountains. And that's where we have a problem. And those of you who've ever been on I-70, Sunday evening, you're smiling, or Friday, know what that problem is. But we do have some data that I think are very encouraging about the millennials that I can certainly talk more about if you want to. One of the ways we do multimodal transportation is with coalitions. is with building partnerships, compromising and building consensus. That's how you get these kinds of projects done. Whether it's Bike Town USA, whether it's individual projects here, like some of the pedestrian underpasses, whether it's transit. And let me just give you one example of a bill that I ran this year, where I pulled together a wide variety of stakeholders from the health community, the Colorado American Heart Association, the Lung Association, the bicycle industry, and a variety of towns and counties and so forth. You bring together the stakeholders, you see what people really want, what people really need, what are they willing to compromise on, how can you build some consensus. Then, at the legislature, you get bipartisan co-sponsors. You work with your friends across the aisle, and you get things done that way. That's how you achieve solutions to issues like transportation. Not using ideology, not building barriers, but building bridges between people. No pun intended, sorry. And then you have to compromise on funding sources and appropriations. Originally, the bill called for $3 million, which had been the amount that had been funded 2.7, 2.9, 2.8 for the past decade in the Safe Routes to Schools projects with the CDOT grant system. That wasn't going to make it through appropriations. So ratchet it down, compromise, and get something that will work. And so I think when we think of multimodal transportation, whether it's bike, ped, transit, high-speed rail, you emphasize the economic benefits, of which there are many, environmental benefits, health benefits, and community benefits. And in the end, then, we can build a brighter future for all of us. And one of the ways to do it is by coming together to create multimodal systems. So again, these systems reduce long-term taxpayer costs, they enhance our local economies, and there's lots of data on that, preserve our environment, protect our health, sustain our communities, and most importantly, they offer us choice. They offer us choice. So if you are interested in these kinds of things, I'm willing to stay afterwards and chat, and we can certainly chat during our discussion period. And you can go to my website, sign up for my newsletter, or you can just email me with questions that you might have. So thank you, and we'll be hearing from you guys.
Thank you, Diane. So next, please welcome David Kutzinger from CDOT.
Yeah. That's not very good. He's being rape shy.
Smiling.
He's smiling? Oh.
Smiling.
There we go. There you go.
Told the Pink Panther joke about that dog not biting, and then the dog bites the person. The person says, "I thought you said your dog didn't bite." The person says, "Well, it's not my dog."
Would you speak up?
Yes, I will. I'll speak up. Thank you. And particularly those in the back row, keep me honest. If my voice volume drops off, raise your hands like it, and I can keep the volume up. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly to introduce you to Diane Mitsch and the Rocky Mountain Rail Authority study that was completed about 3-4 years ago, 2010, 2011. We've taken another look at that, continued moving those ideas forward from that point and provided more detail. One of the recommendations out of the Rocky Mountain Rail Authority study was to look more heavily at technologies in the I-70 corridor, look more heavily at what a financing plan would take to make it work. So we did two